Chairman Cummings, Ranking Member Jordan, and members of the House Oversight and Reform Committee, thanks for inviting me to speak with you today. I'm Ovik Roy, and I'm the president of the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity, a nonpartisan, nonprofit think tank focused on expanding economic opportunity to those who least have it. When we launched in 2016, our first white paper showed how universal coverage, done the right way, can advance both progressive and conservative values at the same time, expanding access while reducing federal spending and burdensome regulations. As you know, reducing the cost of prescription drugs is critical to ensuring that health care is affordable for every American. In my oral remarks, I'm going to focus on two excuses we often hear about extremely high drug prices. The first is that high prices aren't set by manufacturers, but rather by middlemen like pharmacy benefit managers. Second, that rising prices are necessary to fund medical innovation. And finally, I will describe market-based principles that can help restore affordability to prescription drugs. Manufacturers have been advancing the theory that high drug prices aren't their fault. Instead, they argue, they're forced, quote unquote, to charge higher prices to make up for rebates to PBMs. To use a technical term, that's balderdash. Nobody forces drug companies to charge high prices. 75 years of federal policy has made patients insensitive to the price of the drugs they consume. Patients don't always understand how their premiums keep rising on account of rising drug prices, especially in the employer-sponsored market. As a result, in the absence of competition, manufacturers often charge the highest prices they can. Let me explain why drug makers voluntarily offer rebates to PBMs. Private insurers enlist PBMs because PBMs have shown themselves to be good at what's called formulary management. Let's say you're a type 2 diabetic and you have the option of treating your condition with high-cost brand drugs or clinically equivalent low-cost generic drugs. PBMs will structure the insurer's formulary such that if you choose the low-cost generic drug, you'll have a $0 or $5 copay. But if you use the high-cost drug, you might have a $30 copay. In this way, PBMs help reduce the cost of prescription drugs. Indeed, America leads the world in the use of low-cost generics. Nearly 90% of all prescriptions written in the United States are for unbranded generic drugs. Drug makers get around this system by offering rebates to PBMs. Sometimes in exchange for the rebates, the PBMs put a high-cost drug on the zero copay tier alongside the generics. This may sound good on the surface, but by needlessly increasing the use of high-cost drugs, rebates drive up the cost of health insurance for everyone. Drug makers also use rebates to suppress competition. Last October, Merck and Samsung announced that they would be abandoning Lusduna, their competitor to Sanofi's Lantus, even though they'd invested hundreds of millions of dollars in gaining FDA approval. A common practice in such situations is for the incumbent brand to offer deep rebates to the PBMs, effectively dumping their drug onto the market to wipe out new competitors. PBMs genuinely add value in the way they manage drug formularies, but Congress should eliminate rebates to restore transparency and accountability to high drug prices. An oft-repeated cliché is that high drug prices are necessary to fund medical innovation. One test of this cliché is to apply it to other sectors of the economy. You would never hear Sony or Vizio say that high television prices are necessary to fund innovation in the TV market. They know that if their TVs are too expensive, no one will buy them. In 1996, Biogen launched Avonex, a multiple sclerosis drug, for $8,700 a year. 20 years later, they were charging $81,000 a year, nearly 10 times more. Imagine if Sony charged you $81,000 for a 20-year-old TV, claiming that the high price was necessary for innovation. You'd laugh them out of the room. There are two giant holes in the high price for innovation theory. The first is that increasingly, the business model of drug makers is to focus on ultra-rare orphan diseases, where R&D costs are low due to the limited supply of patients for clinical trials, while still charging extreme prices edging towards $1 million per patient per year. The second is that virtually all of the increase in prescription drug spending comes from price hikes on older drugs like Avonex. If a patient with multiple sclerosis is well controlled on Avonex, it's considered bad clinical practice to switch that patient to a different drug, even if that other drug is cheaper. Companies take advantage of patients with chronic disease dependence on their drugs to drastically increase the price of older drugs year over year. So what's the solution? I delve into this topic in my written testimony. The core idea is this: in disease areas where there is robust competition, especially with generic drugs, prices are extremely affordable even in America. Where there are monopolies, legitimate or artificial, prices are high. In the past, Congress and the FDA have sometimes worsened the problem of artificial drug monopolies. This Congress has the opportunity to enact bipartisan reforms. I look forward to discussing these ideas with you in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your opening statement.